I'm going to call this meeting to order. Today is June 21st, 2019. It is 12:30 p.m. and we are in the Joanne Idolette Junior Teacher Education Center. And at this time, we are having a special business meeting. And if you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, before we move into the adoption of orders of the day, I would like Dr. Moxley to please clarify the purpose of this special business meeting.
Yes, Mrs. Sorg, thank you, and members of the board, thank you for being here today. I did, as superintendent, call this meeting and asked Nancy Esplin to notice the meeting. We did notify the paper on 6/14. It was published in the paper on 6/18. We do have a mass group email of people that have signed up to receive notices. We did send that out. It's been placed on the board calendar in the on the website and under events in the website, as we commonly do. So all of that is in order. The reason for my calling this particular meeting, I knew we had a budget workshop this morning. You were already all going to be here, so it did not require me to impose on your other calendar items that you had. But I did have something that I felt was pretty time sensitive. You know that we have been without a finance officer in that area, leading that department for some time. I'm very thankful to Mr. Bargeron for being our consultant and working with us, but I know for efficiency and effectiveness, moving our district forward, we needed to move forward with that. And so the items that you have before you is, for my time here, really looking at the needs of the district to get to the work at hand to move us forward. So I did ask to have those items put for today, and then I can use our upcoming meetings to do appointments.
Okay, thank you. At this time, are there any items that the board members wish to move from consent to action? Wait, am I in the right?
You are, but there's nothing
There
on
are no
consent.
consent
We're not,
items.
there's none. All right, I need a motion for approval.
Move approval.
I'll second.
Okay, Mrs. Justice? Would you like to speak?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Barrenborg? Okay. Any other board members like to speak? No? All in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Do we have any citizen input?
There were none in the basket.
Anyone like to speak? Okay. All right. Okay, so we're moving on to our action agenda, approval of revised organizational chart. Dr. Moxley.
Yes, thank you, board members. You have in front of you the district organizational chart, and this is the top layer that is reporting directly to the superintendent and that director level, coordinator level. So we're only looking at revisions at this point in time. As you are aware, sometime in the past 6 months, I'm assuming, there was a change brought, and the board had approved a deputy superintendent. And that deputy position was kind of second in command, right below the superintendent, but with a strong focus with finance. Since we have not been able to fill that position thus far, I have been out trying to recruit viable candidates that would have the expertise that we needed. So at this point in time, I really feel that based on the needs that I'm seeing in the district and the concerns that you've brought up as board members in our workshops, I've been out in the field, there seems to be some consistent themes that keep coming up with consistency. That's the word I keep hearing, consistency. I keep hearing, procedural questions, procedural things. I hear consistency in the way schools implement procedures, and then it sometimes will rise to the district or rise to your level. And so in order to address that, I just firmly believe that when I looked at that deputy superintendent position with all the items of HR, all those administrative, all those finance things that that span of control and oversight was massive. And HR and finance, those are two very specific areas of expertise. I did my review of past history. I saw that in this district you did have it as 4 assistant superintendents at a point in time, not going into who was in each one of those positions or any of that, but moving forward, I saw that was a structure you had before. So I really am of the belief, and that's why you have the recommendation, that those 2 positions need to be 2 separate positions. One that can really focus on this finance officer and all of those things that are finance and provide that leadership expertise and oversight. We still have a recruitment, the same recruitment issues in making sure that we get that qualified piece. So you're going to see those 2 items separated back out. So this org chart looks very similar to what you've had maybe a year ago, but I did make some changes. One, instead of it being an assistant superintendent, it is a chief financial officer with all those leadership expertise things to guide us as we move forward for a lot of the things that we just talked about in our workshop. The other is an assistant superintendent of human resources and school administration. I know that was assistant superintendent of human resources and IT. You will notice that IT does report up in the strand. It seems to fit there better than it does on the operations side of the house because of the employee information that is on the systems side, the financial side. All of that is located in this building, and it seems like that close proximity makes the most sense. I did change this a little bit, and you'll see when we get to the job descriptions, I've added school administration in this. The reason I have done that is I'm really looking for this person to do all things adults as well. When you think of employees and staff and things that touch staff. The thing that, and Mrs. Berenborg, you said it very eloquently this morning when you talked about leadership and developing that we don't really have that development for people that want to move from one position into administration, that pool process, that training, that leadership development, building capacity in people, that's the connecting the professional development. So we have professional development that falls in curriculum and instruction, but where's the professional development is building that capacity and that leadership and that particular arena. I haven't been able to wrap my arms around that, and frankly, if no one owns it, then it doesn't get done most of the time. And I feel that is we're at a critical juncture for that. That would fall in this arena. The other item is we have evaluation systems. That's an HR function, but it's not day-to-day things. It's the actual implementation of our evaluation systems, whether it's district-level evaluations, principal evaluations, assistant principal, teacher evaluations. There's much that goes into that to making sure that we're implementing it correctly with fidelity. What's our data say? What does our data tell us about where we need to go tomorrow? Doing that high-level analysis and functioning, that would be in this arena. If a principal were to say, I'm not sure how we go about doing this. I see what policy says. I see what the procedures are. How do we manage that? We have contracts. We have 2 employee contracts. Well, how do we manage and implement that? So we're implementing those with fidelity on a day-to-day basis. So it's that contract implementation, that contract management kind of thing that is not the collective bargaining process. That's the process where you're actually putting those into play. Then obviously the collective bargaining process does still fall within this arena. So that's kind of like a snapshot of those 2 positions. And so those are the 2 changes to the org chart. Everything else is the same. As we look at position control, put together our district staffing plan, all those things, there may be some tweaking to this in some of the other layers that come back at a later time, but this is the most critical point, and I am asking for approval.
All right, well, thank you. I need a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay.
Whatever.
Dr. Schiff? With the second?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Mrs. Justice?
Yes, I would like to speak to this, Mrs. Zork. I recognize that today we are adding some additional salary at the district level. The deputy superintendent position would have been a bit more money than a regular superintendent. And to be frank, it was my hope that Mr. Bargeron would join us here in this district. I think that he has been an incredible asset to us. I've enjoyed working with him. His knowledge of the FEFP and school funding has been invaluable, and I think he's enjoyed working with our staff. It seems at this time that's not the case. So I support the changes that you're making. As I have told you in the past, I will support when you do a very good job of explaining your thinking about why you feel that this is important. So while I recognize that we're always mindful of every dollar and we don't want to spend a lot of money in the district house, we want the money in schools. I recognize that supporting those schools properly has to happen. I'm happy to support this today, and I look forward to, making changes as you see fit so that we can function better as a district and as a team.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Schiff?
Can you clarify for me, because I know we haven't had any time to meet, I was out of town. Can you just be more explicit for me about, because we had changed it in order to increase the salary because we weren't able to attract the kind of person which we're now breaking back up. Can you clarify for me how the salary is going to work
Sure.
here and with
Sure.
existing or added
Sure.
resources?
The chief finance officer, this position is still at a higher level.
Like we had at the deputy superintendent?
It
pay
has,
grade?
when we get to the job description, you're gonna see that there is they called it an adjustment. And I have not changed that, and I will tell you why. Because this is a critical shortage area, and when you have a critical shortage area, if you can't fill the position because everyone that is of the expertise that you need is at other positions that have less responsibility or less dollars to be responsible for, and they're making way more, you have to be competitive. So you're gonna see that, and I'm being very transparent about that. But again, it is a critical shortage area, and at this point in time, we run about 1 or 2 applicants coming through the pipeline for
For the
this.
CFO position?
Correct, correct.
Excuse me, for the
correct,
potential CFO
correct.
position.
And that's why it's a little different than an assistant superintendent. A CFO, you're really looking at for that real strong expertise and experience. I need school-based experience at this point in time. So that's why you're gonna see that. So yes, that is still there. The job description's been massaged a little bit to take out those deputy HR things. So let me put it in a bigger picture. So if you go back to this time last year, you had 4 assistant superintendents. The assistant superintendents are at the same salary, no change there. The CFO has that added differential, or that added adjustment. So the difference in cost is really that added adjustment, if you think about it in those terms. Now, why I believe that, again, as I previously stated about the deputy, there's some other things that I think that we will be able to minimize some of the expenditures with that assistant superintendent of HR and school administration that we've had to spend because we didn't have that expertise, that we will be able to stop doing those other expenditures that will help offset that additional adjustment to get that CFO.
Thank you. And, excuse me, totally agree with you. Probably the most critical role for us to fill right now, and I appreciate your analyzing and expertise in how we do that. And so, forgive my having to back up here a minute.
Okay.
So that had been put together as one position. We're breaking it back apart into 2 positions. We're putting the CFO back in a CFO budget line with a differential for that. And then the assistant superintendent, as it was before that, and we had the lines for both positions and the resources for that.
Correct. And the assistant superintendent would be in line with the other assistant superintendents.
Okay.
Okay, so that salary would stay very consistent to what you've had. Now, I have changed the job responsibilities of that assistant superintendent around from what you previously had. And we can talk about that whenever, but, because all of this kind of crosses over into all conversations. But in the job description, I can point some of those things out with their, I'm making their scope a little different. But again, it's still consistent with your budget line.
And not a track for us to go down now, but in thinking about, you said there may be further adjustments to the organizational chart moving forward. Really looking at that whole student services area and how we do that, I hope is something that's on your radar that will
Right.
come back to us moving
Right.
forward.
Right.
Good, thanks.
My turn?
Yeah.
Let me just move this over a little bit. Something that, Dr. Moxley, I don't know if we talked about this yesterday, but something about just a little bit of history of what I brought to the board at a board meeting, and I'm not sure if it was the exact night that we voted on this or not. But something that I realized was Dr. Rendell said at some point that we weren't attracting high-quality people for applicants for either position as they were separate. And that's why he wanted to combine them so that and raise the salary so that he can bring someone of that higher caliber, I suppose, in who might be more attracted to that position. But one of the things that I realized in doing a little bit of research was what we did not do on our part well, from the human resources standpoint, is we did not post these positions when they were separate on various websites. So, I mean, there were a handful of websites that they were on from the beginning, and then there was a 30-day lapse of how long they remained on there. And after the 30 days, because we're now months and months and months into having these open positions, there were several months in which these positions were only posted on our website and Indeed.com, or another one. And I don't have my notes from that night, so forgive me if I'm a little bit off with a little bit of my details. So my concern, or something that I brought to the table, was if we were doing a better job at consistently posting these positions on every website, educational website that we can find out there with regard to open positions and postings and, applicants, somebody who's interested, so on and so forth, we might have had a higher pool of applicants coming in for each one of them. But I didn't think at that time that we did that good of a job for it. And that's where I know that I pulled it, I was in favor of it, and then I started doing research, and then I kind of went back again and said, I've been thinking about this, and I don't think we did a good job. I think we need to go back to the table and repost these and give it a really good, spread, spread out the fact that we have these openings more so that we can attract. Long story short, even though I just went through the long story, is I hope that we do that now. And I went through the long story, I guess, because you weren't here. And I wanted to give you a little bit of an understanding of where I came from on that front. I think that we need to definitely, so your focus on human resources and our policies and procedures, and your keen eye to these very small, what may seem minute in the mundane of school administration, is not minute at all when you are thinking about a school district, whose main focus is teaching and educating, right? And we need that part in this. It is absolutely critical. So I am pleased, very pleased to support this. I hope that we do a much better job at the postings of it, which was really my main point. And something else that I just want to bring up, which was a conversation that I had with Dr. Rendell with regard to the 13% adjustment. When he first brought it to me, I had concerns about it. I thought it was pretty high at the time. And something that I suggested was, why not have a range? Right, so we start here, we can go up to 13%, but it gives the applicant an opportunity to show their skill, their experience, how many years they've been in school-based, well, in this case, for the CFO, school-based finance area, or however we want to word it, but it actually gives room for a little bit of competition in there as well, which is never a bad thing. So that's just something that at this point, I'm not sure if I really want to make an issue of it, but it's just something, again, you weren't part of that conversation, so
Right.
I just wanted to share that in this open forum, especially with board members present, so that we're all on the same page with that. But I'm very pleased to approve this tonight, and I thank you for, today, and I thank. It might be tonight. And I thank you for actually bringing this, to the table, and thank you again for having us directly after our early morning workshop.
Mrs. Barrenborn?
Yes, I did agree with Dr. Rendell that we did need to increase the salary for a financial person, because, as you say, they're rare that really know Florida finance. So we really need somebody there. So I appreciate the fact that you're keeping the salary there. I did have concerns that that person was going to be responsible for all that. And I think we need an expert in HR here. We need to see what we're doing that we can improve on and what we can be the best at. And so I appreciate both of those positions. I do question the Director of Technology reporting to an HR person. But I looked at it and I said, where's the best fit for that person? And there really isn't, and looking at the responsibilities already of the Assistant Superintendent of Safety Operations and Curriculum and Instruction, I don't think I'd want to put that on them. And I think the Chief Financial Officer, although I think that would be a better fit under there, because I've seen it there before, I do think that that's a big responsibility coming in the door as a brand-new person. But that might be one that you want to look at later.
I do agree with you, and frankly, it really could go up under the CFO. I don't have a problem with it either way, and the reason it landed over here was because we have so many things in
Numbers,
that right
yeah.
now. That may be an adjustment that gets made after their.
Yeah, and the only reason why I bring that up is even on paper, it looks like the same number of boxes. Really, when you're looking at the work, I think that HR has a lot of work that doesn't represent itself here.
That's right.
And that's possibly why I think technology should be under finance, but.
Right.
All right, go ahead.
I actually, this came up last time, but I want to be conscious too, when we talk about advertising, that more isn't necessarily better. And I referenced for that when we went out for the assistant superintendent. Right.
I understand.
Good point. Right, so Indeed.com doesn't necessarily get us the most qualified applicants, as we all have had some recent experience with. So sometimes targeting to specific places where we're likely to get great qualified candidates does us better than bigger breadth. Also on salary, and I said the same thing when this came up before. In this position in particular, it is probably the last one in the district I want to nickel and dime on. Like, this is the one in the district I am willing to pay top dollar for top dollar candidate.
Which one?
And, what?
Which one?
The,
CFO.
that we just can't keep going into the next year without a CFO. And if in this, everything rests on how well we are able to understand our budget and our finances. And as we've all had some experience with, if we don't have that, there are so many other things that get backed up down the line. So I actually, with due respect, disagree on that, because I want the person who comes in with the most experience, who is confident in their abilities and says, I'm actually worth this because I am what you need. So I would actually encourage us in that direction. And ditto on my colleagues' comments. Other than that.
May I make one other
Go
comment? Because I know we're ready to go, and I would never stand in the
wanna
way of a
say
vote
something,
either.
but
Yeah,
go
but you
ahead.
go ahead.
Okay, well, I do want to say that, through our budget workshop, when we were talking about priorities, some of the areas that kept coming up was, leadership opportunities and, recruiting and just so many areas that are a priority to us, where all our other assistant superintendents are really maxed out on what they can take on. And if we want to make that a priority, we have to make it a budget priority. So I do appreciate you bringing this forward, and and we'll get into the description, but bringing in the school administration part is, to me, that's very wise. That's something that, has never been brought forward, but I think it's very wise, and it just shows through your experience that, that it's gonna work out really well for us. I do like the fact that we're breaking it back out, because it's always been about checks and balances. I feel like with our chief financial officer and our assistant superintendent of HR, that will help with the checks and balances there. And with having a CFO and not an assistant superintendent, our assistant superintendents are going, our chief financial officers will have the ability to ask tough questions of our district leadership. And whereas if we had an assistant superintendent of finance, it pretty well put them on the same level, and it might have been a conversation that person didn't feel they had the authority to have that conversation with the other department head. So I appreciate that. With us being the largest employer in Indian River County and not having an assistant superintendent of human resources, it just only makes logical sense that we do that. And also with us having almost a $300 million budget, breaking that out, I really think that we are heading in the right direction. Going back to the fact of not being able to fill the position that we had posted, I really think there's not really one reason that I think that it wasn't filled. I see a lot of reasons why that position wasn't filled. I see where the job description got kind of compiled into one, and then it was an overload, and then it was an underpaid position, and then there was the turmoil that was going on at the time. I don't think anyone at that level of professionalism wanted to come in at that time. And so I think going forward that we'll have a better pool of candidates, just because now the waters are calm and we know what direction we're heading. So I think we'll have a better pool once Dr. Moxley gets this posted out there. But with that, I am ready to,
I have a comment.
go ahead.
Thank you. Just some clarification, because something Mrs. Zork said actually made me really uncomfortable. The CFO position, as far as leadership in the district, as a deputy superintendent, I would understand that would have been above. But when I'm looking at the organizational chart, I see that our assistant superintendents and our CFO are at the same level. And while the pay grade may be different, the level of authority, I think I would like some clarification on. We have had in the past a financial officer in this district that I believe had too much autonomy and authority. And because of that, and because of a lack of collaboration amongst departments and planning, I think it led us down the road of where we were with our budget a little bit. And I think budget prioritizing amongst departments is very important, and the CFO is a support to that. So perhaps some clarification about authority.
Sure. The CFO is different. It is a completely different thing. It's a department unto its own areas of specialization, and it spans and touches everything else in our district. Is one more important than the other? No. Do the assistant superintendents report to the CFO? No. Does the CFO have autonomy to look at everybody's budgets, to ask for clarification, ask for information? Yes. They need that ability to say, I need your budget, let's sit down, wait a minute, you've overspent here, that kind of thing. Do they have the authority to go in and direct them to say, you're wrong, you're gonna get, you've got to make this adjustment in how you're going about doing business? No. Do they have the ability and the authority to say, you need to stop spending because you're over your budget? Yes. Everything that is financial, they have the ability to say, you need to stop right now in this part of your budget because you don't have a budget for that. And that's a conversation. But they would have that directly. So it's not that it's just different.
But it's on the
different.
same level
They're,
as
they're
the
on,
other.
because they're all, they're all
No, and I
reporting to me.
appreciate, I
Yeah.
didn't realize that, so I appreciate you
Yeah.
clarifying that.
They're not a
That's-
deputy.
Right,
They're not
okay,
a
thank
deputy,
you.
yeah.
Yeah.
So nobody's reporting to, another area assistant superintendent's not reporting to them. But they do have a level of control and say over financial matters in the financial running of the districts, whether it's school level, whether it's a department level.
But ultimately, the responsibility and
Is
the control
mine.
is yours.
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so the final decision, but I would be expecting that CFO to be monitoring everybody's budgets.
Sure.
And when there's an area or a concern or an issue, they're going to take care of that. Everything wouldn't necessarily say, I need your permission to go have
Right,
a conversation.
exactly. But it's
So,
that check and balance.
Yeah, that is
we're
exactly
talking
right.
about. And I think,
Yeah.
who was it, Mr. Weiss?
Conley Weeks, yeah.
He had said that that was something that we were missing before, was that check and balance. So I
Right,
appreciate
right.
you clarifying that.
And the only comment I wanted to say, Mrs. Sperenborg, you raised a really good question, and you've highlighted some of kind of the back and forth here. This is where we landed for the sake of our conversation today. But I just want to make sure that with the board, that I have your blessing, that as we're looking and filling these two positions, it may make sense that IT gets put in finance over the HR. I think that will reveal itself as we move forward here. And I would like your flexibility that if it does fit better under finance, that may be where I end up, but I would always come back to you with that. But I do want to have that flexibility.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? No? Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0. Moving on to action item B, approval of update job description of Chief Financial Officer. Dr. Moxley.
Yes, this job description is very similar to one you have seen. All the finance areas are covered there. Obviously, in this particular arena, they'll be doing all things risk management, benefits, purchasing, distribution, all those things that tie to finances. There are very few revisions here, but you will see that adjustment with regard to the salary for the recruitment and expertise there, and I do recommend approval.
Okay. I need a motion for approval.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay. Mrs. Rosario with Mrs. Justice with a motion, and then Mrs. Rosario with a second. Mrs. Justice?
No, ma'am.
Mrs. Rosario?
Yeah, I'm sure you all will,
Hear you. Speaking to.
oh, I'm sorry. I'm sure you'll get to this, but just in case, the second and the third, fourth, and the fifth pages, the very top heading still says
Oh, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. In fact,
Assistant Superintendent.
thank you, we did get that corrected.
Okay.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
then, does this person, I didn't see it in the job description, what is the involvement of the CFO in bargaining?
The CFO is very important to the bargaining process. They are not necessarily at the bargaining table consistently, but there may be times when the CFO does attend to present information.
Okay.
So they are very integral, obviously, as we put our finances in order. But it is not uncommon for the CFO to be requested to attend a bargaining session for information purposes.
Because I mean, there are several places here where, for example, in number 19, oversee the business services department, risk management, employee benefits. I mean, when we're, sitting at the table discussing bargaining, in negotiations, you know, would we have, and you just clarified that, but that's where my thinking was, do we have the CFO at the table to discuss those bullet points?
Any of those things that relate to that, they are the expert bringing the fact. This particular item that you mentioned in 19, that is the actual day-to-day administration oversight implementation. But yes, when you are talking anything that is going to impact budget or money, they would be involved.
May I ask
Thank
a
you.
clarifying question? When we meet in executive session, the CFO would always be present
Absolutely,
regarding bargaining.
correct. And really anything that involved money, if it were even
Litigation or?
if that was the specifics of that particular item.
But clarification, under intra-agency communication delivery number 25, serve as the district's representative in legislative activities. Is it normally the CFO who would represent us legislatively?
It depends on how the district is structured. That doesn't mean as a district, you may use a legislative person that goes up and represents you. That would not be the CFO. This CFO they're actually looking in the Finance Officers Association, just like FSBA. They do have a legislative, they're in their association representing Indian River.
Okay, just wanted that clarification.
Mrs. Behrenberg, did you have a comment or question?
I think it's fine.
Good?
Thank
All right. Do we have any other comments or questions? No? Are we ready to vote?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0. Okay, we're moving to our last item, action item. C, approval of update job description of Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources and School Administration. Dr. Moxley?
Yes, thank you very much. This particular one is a new job description for us. It does take some consideration from the Assistant Superintendent for Human Resource Services and IT that has been in existence in this district. We did look at any of the HR things that were put in the deputy, so we didn't lose anything there. And then I also looked at the school administration side of the house with leadership development. So you will see a lot of HR things in here. It is this job description, well, most job descriptions can be more generic. This one is much more prescriptive and detailed because because it is new, I wanted to be very clear of what the expectations were for this individual coming in and looking at it and where the role is and how it's going to be developed. But you will see a lot of employment things where they're assisting the superintendent. They may provide a lot of oversight that leadership, that direction, day-to-day will still fall with the executive director and the director of labor services. But you will see those kinds of things. And as far as some other things with the administration part of it, you're going to see with the individual professional development plans for any employee. We know principals work with teachers if that is appropriate, or even non-instructional, but they would be there to provide support to those folks. They would be there to provide support for district level. Any of those things, they would provide that oversight. That's one particular one. Leadership development. That development and that protocol with having a viable pool of candidates, getting principals. So if I'm a new principal in the district, this person would particularly work with that person for onboarding. If there's any mentoring that is needed, if there's extra support, same thing with assistant principals as well. Right now, curriculum and instruction, they coordinate all principal and assistant principal meetings. I foresee both of these assistant principals or assistant superintendents working together because there are other things in addition to curriculum that our leaders should be receiving support and capacity building on. So that tends to fall in all of this. The other thing is there are some things that are just general school administration things that I don't know where you call to get that. And so this person would do that. The evaluations of our principals and assistant principals, this would be kind of the overarching person that coordinates how those are done. Now, it may be that we divide up so that there's not one person doing 23 of them, but this person would be the one that coordinates those efforts so that everybody, we're calibrating the implementation of our evaluation system. So those are just some highlights. Now, to go back to Mrs. Rosario, what you talked about, the advertisement of this, I've already talked with HR about this, that there are many places that this should be advertised. We have state associations like FASA. We have other associations that are HR associations that we would put this in. Ed Week is another one. Some of them have fees, so we have to be cognizant of how much the fees are. But even the finance officer one, we have a State Finance Officers Association. We have GFOA. We have all those organizations. That you use those organizations to help advertise, because that's where your experts are.
That's right. That's exactly what my point was.
So I am recommending approval of this.
Okay. All right, I need a motion. Okay. Wait, we're under, we're getting ready to go and discuss.
Oh, okay,
We
good,
gotta-
good, good. Yeah.
Gotta get it, okay. I have Dr. Schiff as a motion and then Mrs. Justice with a second. Dr. Schiff,
Ma'am, I'm good.
you're good?
I'm good too.
Yeah, I thank you for mentioning that, because that's exactly where I was heading before. So it's not about Indeed, but it's on those very specific strategic sites that will attract the people with that background. I just wanted to reiterate for those who are listening, who haven't had a chance to really read through the responsibilities, there are just a few here that really touch on pretty much all of those areas that we talked about earlier today, which is so critical. Number 5, assist the superintendent in monitoring and oversight of the desegregation plan. I mean, that's exactly what we've been talking about. 8, oversee the implementation and personnel policies and procedures, something that we all have concerns with, even though we have them posted on the website. How are they being applied? That's something, we need a manual that says, this is what we do, this is step 1, step 2, something that we can go to with a little, blurb at the bottom that says, may change depending on the circumstance, but that we still have a policy in place, or rather a manual in place that outlines all of that. Critically important. Number 9, developing and evaluating the evaluation programs. Number 10, I'm not going to read all of them. Number 10, that's where our technology systems are in it. But 11 also, that's the overseeing the comprehensive recruitment. So recruiting highly effective personnel, retaining them. This person is going to pretty much have these job responsibilities. My question is, I did not see in the overview of qualifications, I noticed in number 7 that the person should have 5 years of experience in the areas of contract negotiations and employee investigations.
Where's that?
It's on the first
Oh,
page.
from the very first page, all the way up on the top under qualifications, it's number 7.
Okay.
We need someone with this expertise, without question. But I did not see that reiterated in the specific line items in any of the performance responsibilities. So I was wondering, have this person specifically, let me see what my notes were.
I think 22 and 23 was
22, I
where
may
I
have
was,
missed it.
I thought I
22.
was covering that, but
22 and
maybe
23.
it doesn't
No, you
read
did.
it.
In 22 and 23, it covers the collective bargaining,
Perfect.
grievance, and claim
Grievance.
investigations.
Perfect, okay. I missed it.
There's a lot here.
Yeah, I
There's a
missed
lot
it.
here.
Okay, and then this question was really where I was going with the same thing. What would be the relationship, and I probably already know it, but just for the sake of having the conversation, what would be the relationship between the Director of Labor Relations, and the Executive Director of Human Resources in terms of direct reporting, right? So right now, we have the Director of Labor Relations directly reporting to the Executive Director of Human Resources, or the immediate, I believe.
I don't think that, right now, the way they are, neither one of them, the Director of Labor Relations does not report to the Executive Director.
Oh,
I don't believe
I
so.
did not know that.
No, no. But they will, both of those two positions will report to
Okay.
the Assistant Superintendent.
Okay, so with regard to labor relations investigations, will those two positions, obviously, the assistant superintendent will have ultimate say. I'm really trying to kind of get some clarity on the investigations that occur, because
Sure.
I mean, I think we've gone overboard on, filing grievances against each other, and then everybody's kind of in-house, filing and then investigating, and then nobody can say anything. And so I just want to be able to understand what's the plan, so
Sure.
that we don't, because they're on steroids.
Sure.
It's just crazy.
I think, well, that's an issue
Yeah,
that needs to be addressed.
right.
So going back to the first part of your question, with a reporting structure, the executive director for HR will report directly to the assistant superintendent. The director of employee and labor relations will report directly to the assistant superintendent. So what the assistant superintendent will work on is bringing procedures, protocols, things, how the workflow goes. Right now, it's kind of all over the place. Okay, and understandably so, if you don't really know your chain of command.
Right.
And ultimately, if there's no one sitting in that seat, and then you have this deputy structure, and there's no one sitting in that seat, then really the chain of command takes you all the way to the office of the superintendent. And that just, it logistically just doesn't work. I mean, that span is too far. The chances of getting those day-to-day questions in a timely enough manner just doesn't exist. So this will help with that. Now, the assistant superintendent, they will have the final say, because they're providing that oversight. So when you specifically talk about employee complaints, when those come in, those will go to the director of employee and labor
Okay.
relations. However, that person is going to be meeting and be in close proximity, that when those are coming in, that assistant superintendent's gonna get a report. Here are the investigations that are new. Those have come in today. Well, let's look at those. How do those need to
Good.
be handled? There'll be that check and balance with
Good.
that. When an investigation is complete, that will go to the assistant superintendent for review and final sign-off, to make sure all the records are there, everything is complete, and that file is being closed. How is the resolution being communicated? When are the day count for the 10 days to run, and when does that become public record? So that everything's put there together.
Good. That makes me feel a little bit better. It does, because, we know what's happening, and
Right.
I don't think that our employees feel safe, and having that check and balance actually will build a sense of trust and security. So it's good to know that there is going to be that relationship here, or rather, the working relationship that they'll have. So thank you.
And part of it's training and just in service on how the protocols will work.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to say thank you for this in-depth job description. Looking at it, I don't think I'd apply for the job because it's just so in-depth. But I think it's important to lay it all out, especially since I appreciate the fact that as an interim superintendent, you're looking beyond your term. And I think that's important that we have this information out there for people, so. And I think it's great for depth of clarity too.
Yeah.
For us, because we're looking at it saying, okay, whose responsibility? Oh, there it is.
Right.
Responsibility. Thank you.
Okay. I wanted to, I made some notes after we had met yesterday, and I went back through and I reread performance responsibilities. I do want to note the number one, there are 81 job responsibilities that that we're noting in here. But one that we kept talking about and we keep talking about is assist the superintendent in personnel-related issues on regional, state, and national basis. And we have in quotations are here, teacher shortage, recruitment, and certification. I love that we are making this a priority. You know, we're making it a focus. We're not just talking about it. We're actually putting action to it. So I appreciate that with this. Again, what Mrs. Rosario said, number 5, assist the superintendent with monitoring, overseeing the desegregation plan. That is, that's been a priority of the board for the last 4 years or 5 years. So I appreciate us actually putting a plan of action in place. Going down to 17, oversee the reassignment of transfer employees to maintain appropriate staff balances within the district. I think, yeah, I think this is something that we need help in. So I appreciate you having that. I did also miss, and I'm glad that you clarified, but I did have the question of overseeing the grievance process, employee investigations, because I too feel like we've gotten out of control with the investigations, but having this person to be that check and balance. So what I need to know is, I was listening to you explain the relationship between the director of, employee and labor relations. But my concern right now is, you know, who is signing off with authority to say that you can even dive into those investigations?
That's a good
Before it actually, you know, I understand that they're gonna sit down and they're gonna collaborate on a weekly or ever so often report on the investigations, but having that check and balance of, does this really qualify in a need for an investigation, or is this something that me as the assistant superintendent of HR could bring the 2 employees in and maybe resolve the issues so it doesn't have to go to an investigation?
Absolutely, and that's what I believe that assistant superintendent does, is when things come in. Now, they may come into the director of employee and labor relations, but they will actually look and say, okay, what's the appropriate course of action? It's just like anything else, you know, a complaint can come in or someone can file a lawsuit, but that doesn't mean that how is it going to end up? I mean, not every lawsuit that's ever filed goes to a jury trial. But you know what I'm saying is that, you know, a complaint comes in, or a letter saying, I have this concern or I have this problem, what's the appropriate way to handle that? And I think as people, and we establish protocols and ways to handle things, then it'll become very clear on how we do that. So part of this is building capacity, training, and understanding. But yes, that assistant superintendent would do that.
Okay, all right, that gives me more comfort on that, because that is an area that I've had some concern of. Overall, I think it's a superb job description. I definitely think it hits the areas that we've talked about, that we have some, that we want to make priorities. And so I do appreciate you bringing this forward. Does anyone else, did you have any final comments or
I don't,
this?
yep,
have any?
thank you.
Okay. We ready to vote?
Yes.
Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
5-0.
Great, thank you.
Superintendent report. Dr. Moxley, do you have
I
anything?
don't have anything else other than to say thank you for being here on a Friday.
We don't have any items for board discussion. Board member matters. Mrs. Justice, would you like to?
No, ma'am.
Okay,
No, ma'am. I'm good.
all right. I agree. All right, superintendent closing, it sounds like you're,
Thank you.
that's it. All right, it is 1:24 and we're gonna adjourn this meeting.